Right. So let's go. Let's go. Talking about Samson Davis this morning. To this day, I'm grateful to the Cosby Show. When I was a kid, it allowed me to dream. Back then, I didn't have any personal contact with people who were doctors and lawyers. Families like that live far away in the suburbs, and kids from my rugged Newark neighborhood couldn't even catch a glimpse of that world. But the Huxtables never turned me away. I love looking into the center of this TV family and seeing a father there. Cliff Huxtable always knew what was going on under his roof. He made sure Rudy kept her promise to go to dance rehearsal and helped Vanessa search frantically for a missing history paper. And he always steered frightly Denise, back to reality. He was the kind of dad who passed male traditions on to son Theo, even if they were silly rituals like the Christmas episode where they struggled to put up the holiday lights. Cliff and Claire fascinated me. They touched tenderly, they laughed. Together, they supported their children's ambitions and pushed them to reach even higher. Their brownstone in Brooklyn seemed like a laboratory for life lessons. They gave their kids advice, then stood aside and let them make it on their own. Those Thursday nights spent watching Cosby on our basement couch opened my eyes. But when the sitcom went off, my brief escape ended. My world didn't look anything like that. One of my Christmas memories is the year that my father pulled a gun on my mother. I was about 6 years old, and I remember it happened on a day when everyone of my 5 siblings was at home. My sister and mother were in the kitchen fixing a holiday meal. Nobody can remember what started it, but Pops definitely had been drinking. He didn't usually drink heavily, but when he did, you could count on the fact that some sparks would ignite his daily conversations at home. I remember hearing my parents scuffle in the kitchen, and it spilled out into the living room where my sisters were peeling potatoes. It got so bad that Pops went upstairs and got a gun. He came downstairs waving it and yelling. Everything happened so fast, but it was but it will always be a frozen moment in my memory. My father stood on the third step, pointing the barrel of the gun at my mother. I'll shoot you, woman. I will kill you. They stood there. I stood there with my brothers, Carlton and Andre, not believing my eyes. I tried to cry, but couldn't. All I could see was mom's dying and my father going to jail. My mother stood there, but taunted him. Go ahead, shoot me, she said. If you've never heard your mom sound like Clint Eastwood, believe me, it's not a good feeling. I knew this was it. All the previous arguments had built up to this day, the day where it would all come to a climatic end. I didn't want my mom to die. Please, God, don't let him pull the trigger. My older sisters jumped up and stood in the middle of the battle. But my brother Carlton was crying hysterically, and my older brother Andre was shouting, Stop! Why don't y'all stop? I just stared. Is this how life is supposed to be? Then it ended. Dad lowered the gun and retreated upstairs. What I want to point out with what I read is that unlike George, Sam grew up with his father. However, he experienced violence in his home, domestic violence. Okay, so that's the difference. So he grew up with his father, but look at the type of relationship his father and his mother have. Just want to point it out to you guys because we're gonna discuss it. Okay. Mine wasn't the kind of house where you could learn a lot about conflict resolution. My mom picked relentlessly at my father. She wasn't scared of him, boy. She wasn't scared. She was a tough woman. She'd rag on him for coming home late, but not being able to wake up in the morning. Everybody who knows my mother, Ruthner Davis, knows that she is a self-determined, strong-willed person who follows her own drummer. She is a homemaker, and I think a lot of her fights with my dad stemmed from the fact that she felt hemmed in by serving thanklessly all the people crammed into our small house on a trouble-plagued Newark street. Still, my always supportive mom is my hero, and I've watched her show superhuman strength in dealing with the rough realities of her life. She is in she is in essence a country girl, raised on a South Carolina farm and transplanted to Newark. She's been an early riser since girlhood when she had to feed chickens, and to this day she rises at 4 a.m. to sweep clean the streets of her neighborhood. I've got to keep busy, she says. For decades after she left the South, she insisted on using a washboard to do our laundry by hand and hanging our clothes outside to dry. My dad found some of this behavior annoying and shouted at her, "You still got those old ways?" It's not hard for me to put myself in my father's shoes. His daily life had to be hard, supporting a family of 8 on one small salary. My father, Kenneth Davis is his father's name, okay, grew up in South Carolina, served in the Army during World War II, and probably had every intention on taking part in the American dream when he returned home and married my mother. So after the military, he came home, he met his wife, and they wound up getting married. She was a pretty and petite 15-year-old he met in a country at a country carnival. Breathtaking is what my father said the first time he laid eyes on my mother. From the moment they said hi, he knew she was the one he would marry. What I want to point out with that is that look at how he felt about her when he first met her up until how he feels now. It's a stark difference. Yeah, I just want to point that out because they started off real good. He loved her. He thought that, man, this woman is breathtaking, so much so that he wound up marrying her. Okay. But look at now what's going on in their home. They got a whole lot of domestic violence going on now. So they started off good, but now things are falling apart. I just want to point that out to you guys. Okay. They live in a small South Carolina town called Hemingway for about 10 years and had 2 kids together. My brother Kenneth Jr. and my sister Rosaline, before deciding to join the Great Migration North in the early 1950s. In Newark, Pop found steady employment fueling planes at Butler Aviation, where he worked for 35 years until he retired. Moms played the role of housewives and nurturer for our family, which was expanding rapidly. 4 more children arrived after the move to Newark. Felice, Andre, me, and then Carlton. In 1968, 5 years before I was born, Dad used the GI Bill to purchase our wood frame house on Ludlow Street, a nice area at the time. But once crack entered the scene in the 1980s, like a thunderclap explosion, Our neighborhood seemed to sink into despair, under attack from within. Crack pulled apart many of the families even near us. Women who traditionally served as our community's backbone lost their maternal instincts once they fell under the spell of the white powder. Not since the rise destroyed Newark in the 1960s had we witnessed such vast devastation. So drugs completely damaged their community. Okay, and he experienced this as a child. Okay, I just want to point that out. You know, he was aware that drugs totally ravaged through his community. Okay. Disappearing into his bedroom every night was Pop's way of coping. After working a full day, then coming home to face everyday hassles from collection notices to corner windows to family squabbles. I don't think Pop intentionally planned to wall himself off emotionally, and he probably never realized that over time he became a distant and hands-off father. I suspected that he was just repeating his silent past. He left most of the parental duties to my mom, which was common for men at the time. So even though Sam had his father in his home, man, his father had him emotionally checked out. You know, he would go in his room all day. They wouldn't see their father. Okay. This is his story. Okay. This is what he experienced. He said all of the burden was placed on my mom. So he grew up with his father, but it's almost like he didn't grow up with his father, according to him. Okay. I'm sure she raised us in the same stoic Southern way that defined his own upbringing. To his credit, excuse me one second, let me silence somebody. Okay, sorry about that. I'm sure he raised us in the same stoic Southern way that defined his own upbringing. To his credit, he never walked away from his family. He wrote the monthly mortgage check until the house was paid off. He paid off the house. He gave his children the essentials: food, shelter, clothing, the occasional spankings when we got out of line. He came from a time and place where that was all that was expected of a father. In many ways, he did the best he could, and I recognize that. Many of my childhood friends considered me lucky to even have had a father, which was a nearly extinct species in our neighborhood. I have to admit, they were right. Had my father ever gotten together to sit for a portrait when I was young, at least my pop would have been in the picture. It would have been a nice looking moment captured in time with Pops, the breadwinner, seated in a chair, and his wife and 6 kids clustered around him. And we would have cherished such a photograph because for that one moment, we would have looked every inch the healthy nuclear family, one that could have given the Huxtables a run for their money. But the camera would have missed the unspoken stories, those disappointments, that broken dreams that seemed to overwhelm my parents. Since they couldn't lift themselves out of our poor working class ghetto, they retorted to blaming each other. You got all these mouths to feed and can't even pay the bills, my mother would sometimes tell him. As children, we used to witness more vitality and fireworks than we thought our tiny two-bedroom house could withstand. We lived in a two-bedroom house with all those kids. Oh no, here it comes. I used to think when I see an argument between my parents starting to shape up, like storm clouds blowing in to ruin a sunny day. My parents' fights used to make me quake inside. My heart trembled so hard that it seemed the whole house was shaking. I might be sitting in the kitchen just chilling with my mom. Then we'd hear Pop's car in the driveway. Almost without realizing it, I would brace myself. A fight could start in a flash and was almost always prompted by something laughably trivial. Don't put the water in the refrigerator. Woman, shut the hell up. Damn it. I told you not to put the water in there. And next thing you know, it'll be on. They're fighting now. It'll start just like that. Little tempers flare up. Little temper flare-ups were common, and I could easily shake those off. Mom and Pop would spar verbally or lightly shove each other around, then brush themselves off and retreat to their separate rooms. The married couple lived in separate rooms. But sometimes there were roaring fights, seismograph needle shaking brawls that would pop off at a moment's notice. Like the time when they were shoving each other around in the kitchen and Pops and Moms pushed my father out the door and locked it. This sent Pop into a rage. So he smashed his hand through the kitchen window, cutting his arm pretty badly. They argued about the same things over and over. Neither one ever cared or dared to change the way they interacted. Sometimes I wondered if they even knew how. As a young boy, I could often see the disconnect between the two of them. We were reminded constantly that it was only because of the kids that they were still together. I used to pray that through some act of nature or an outside miracle, they would somehow find their lost love for each other. But as the years passed and our home became a boxing ring for jabs and uppercuts, it became obvious that I wasn't going to get my wish. Both my parents were permanent reminders of their stormy marriage. Pops has a gash across his forehead, and my mom's smooth brown cheek is marred by slash marks. Both wounds were suffered during the same fight, which happened before I was born, but my sister Felice was always happy to fill me in on the drama that preceded me. This particular argument was about her. Mom told Pops that Felice should have gone to school that day, and he apparently disagreed. Mom's grabbed a bottle and broke it on his forehead. Pop retaliated by grabbing an ashtray and using it like a razor to slice Mom's cheek. A lot of domestic violence going on in the house, and this is what Sam experienced. Okay? The police came and made sure that Mom and Pops were taken to the hospital, but both were bleeding profusely. Both had stitches and came home from the hospital with bandages on their face. According to Felice, they actually had the nerve to be lovey-dovey after that. For Felice, it was proof of our family's looniness that after the episode was over, our parents were at each other's side, all cuddled up, caring for each other's wounds. So they would fight, and then they would be back lovey-dovey with one another. Okay, so they just had a violent way of kind of dealing with their disagreements. So they would fight, and then they would butt each other up. Okay, this is Sam's experience. Okay. I didn't see much of this kind of affection between my parents. I never witnessed them hugging or treating each other in a caring way. I am the fifth of six children, and by the time I reached school age, they weren't even bothering to create the illusion of love. The master bedroom belonged to Pop, and he would retreat up there as soon as he got home from work to play his guitar and listen to music. He'd come down for dinner, and that was it. Mom created a space for herself in the basement. This arrangement didn't seem right to me. From what I gathered from watching shows like Cosby, parents were supposed to sleep in the same bed. Claire and Cliff, after all, usually shared a laugh or a kiss as they snuggled. So he didn't know what marriage was supposed to be like between a husband and a wife, but him watching the Cosby Show gave him an idea. So when he saw his mom and his wife, his mom and his daddy operating the way they operated, it didn't make sense to him. He saw the Cosby sleep in the same bed. He saw them show affection to one another. So that was a gauge for him. Okay, the Cosby Show was somewhat of a marriage gauge for him, but that's not what he saw in his home. Just want to point that out. But my parents didn't work as a team. They went their opposite ways most of the time. Pop went to work and brought the money home, and Mom's managed the home front. Pop shopped for the food, and Mom cooked it. Mom was the affectionate caretaker of the children, and Pop seemed to be worried about other things when he was at home. One upside to this approach was that Pop wasn't the main disciplinarian. Administering punishments fell to Moms, and she would come after us wielding everything from a belt to an electric cord. But my father hit me only once when I refused to apologize to my brother Colton after accidentally hitting him in the eye. Pop's silent demeanor demanded respect and good behavior. So Pop didn't talk much. Pops would put that eye on you. If he put that eye on you, you better get yourself together. So he ain't whoop him a whole lot because Pop had that seriousness about him that you better get yourself together. They collaborated best in times of emergency. Then they'd be like Batman and Robin zipping off on a mission, like the day I cut my hand on our metal blinds. I was about 5 and I had been playing with the blinds in our kitchen, running my fingers in and out of the slats and cords. I was keeping my mom company while she cooked dinner. Even though the roughest times, she prided herself on having dinner ready when my father came home from work. Okay, so even though they had a violent relationship, she prided herself on making sure her husband had something to eat when he got home from work. Minutes before Pop drove up, I grabbed the blinds in my left hand and tore a huge gash in my palm. I was bleeding all over the place when he came in the door. Almost without a word, he grabbed me, and Mom's grabbed her pocketbook. Andre happened to be walking in the door and nearly had to jump out the way. Mom and Pops hustled me into the car and back down the driveway in a hurry. "We're taking your brother to the hospital," was all he heard as we screeched out of sight. It wasn't like there was a fight every night. Sometimes our house was peaceful, especially when Mom and Pop stayed out of each other's way. And on dire occasions, like when I got those 10 stitches in my hand after the blinds accident, my parents would be downright nurturing. I noticed that if I hurt myself or got in trouble, Mom and Pops would put their differences aside and rush to help me. Check this out. Even as a child, I began to see a pattern emerging, but I wouldn't fully understand it until later. It seemed that Pops had erected a force field around him that I couldn't penetrate. I wondered whether when he turned the doorknob to our house every day, something happened that just sapped the joy out of him. Pops didn't delight in fatherhood. He didn't reach for me when he came in the door. Every day it was the same. He'd say hi and maybe grab something to eat on the way to his room. He'd close the door and I'd listen as he gently played his guitar. Sometimes he'd join us in the living room where he might watch TV with us or play his favorite albums, often sometimes melodies from Nat King Cole or his favorite hummingbirds. Never did he say, "How was your day?" Much less, want to go fishing or camping? Perhaps Pops figured he shouldn't be too soft with me because reality was waiting just outside our front door, and he felt his sons needed to be as tough as possible to deal with it. But whatever the reason, my father made the boundary lines of our relationship clear. Check out this. I will not hug you. I will not tell you I love you. I will not have idle conversations with you. I will not let my guard down around you. I will always be your father. And so that's how he handled fatherhood. Okay. That's how he treated his kids. What was going on in my house wasn't unusual. All my friends and I scrapped by with minimal interactions from our parents. Back then, childhood was a community experience, especially during the summer. We threw our clothes on early in the morning and met one another outside to hang out all day wherever we wanted. We knew to come back home when the streetlights came on. Our older brothers and sisters, if we had them, were expected to watch us. Our parents were too busy with working and trying to pay the bills and cope with the many hassles of being poor. Frankly, I was grateful I didn't have a more neglectful set of folks. I ran with a lot of guys whose parents found time for everything but their kids. Hanging out, partying, getting high, escaping reality. I had one friend whose father frequently came home drunk. Sometime I looked down the street to see my friends and his father having a violent fist fight in their front yard, duking it out for the world to see. No one even thought it was strange or out of place to see the two of them go at it. So you got father and son fighting in the front yard, and that was common. Nobody even thought nothing of it. Our little corner of Newark was wedged between the city's airport and a cemetery. And when I was growing up, I couldn't imagine living in a better place. We didn't have a lot of money, and it didn't matter to me that I shared a bed with my two brothers or that my parents couldn't afford swimming lessons or vacations. All the people I loved were here, and that was good enough for me. There's a big age span between the six children in my family. I grew up closest to Andre and Carlton, my brothers who were nearest to my age. Although I look up to my oldest brother and sister, Kenny and Rosaline, our relationships were different. They had been born more than 20 years before I was and were often away from the house. I had one more older sister, Felice, who got married and lived in Hawaii during her preteen days, but moved back to the mainland when I was 14. It was then that we bonded, staying up late, talking and playing spades, Monopoly, and backgammon. She was my she was my older sibling. She and my older sibling moved out once they grew up, but they often returned to the nest sometimes with their spouses. At one time, I counted 12 people living in our two-bedroom house. One time, there had 12 people in the house. Although it was crowded, there was always something fun and exciting going on. To make room for our many house guests, Carlton and I sometimes shared a sleeper sofa in the basement with my mother. Across the street from our tidy row of tiny houses stood a 8-story public housing development with hundreds of low-income people stacked on top of one another. It was chaos right across the street, especially after the crack epidemic hit. As a kid, it was nothing for me to see stripped, stolen cars on the streets, gun-toting pedestrians, or women. I'm not going to read that. Suddenly, it became common to hear gunshots or walking down the street and see a crime scene marked off with yellow tape. We kids became so desensitized that even murders ceased to shock us. I remember one day I saw a crowd standing in the street and learned that a neighborhood guy had been shot and his body found under a car. I saw his frame lying in a body bag. It was as common as a 90-degree day in summer. I remember that day vividly because the dead person happened to be the older brother of one of my friends. He had just come home from serving time in jail for a drug charge. There had been a party to welcome him home in the recreation center across the street from the projects, featuring good food and lots of dancing. The adults partied all night, smoking weed and getting drunk. I was about 9 years old. All right. So, what I want to do right now is have a little stopping point for very, very, very brief conversation based on what you guys have already heard. This is a good stopping point. I do have a lot of stuff to still cover in the book, but I want you guys to talk to me about what you guys have heard so far, if you don't mind.
Um, I heard about his dad,
Hunter, you
his uncle.
got to speak up, man.
Um, I heard how his uncle was like beating his mom brutally. Like they were scratching each other with like pans and glass and stuff like that. And they both went into the hospital. And right whenever they just finished arguing, they started being nice to each other, even though they already know it's gonna happen again.
I um I think the dad was wrong, and I think what Hunter's saying is true. They say that they love each other, but when they say that they love each other, they don't actually mean it because they're doing the same thing over and over again. So that's not real love, and that's what I think.
Okay. So everybody don't think that's real love. Anybody else want to chime in? Do anybody agree with Avery? It's not real
Good
love,
morning.
fighting one another.
Well, I think that I think Avery got a good point, but I also believe that sometimes people love each other, Avery, and they just may not know how to show it. And so they love each other, I believe. But again, you got to learn how to show love because love is an action word. So you got to learn how to show them. And I hope y'all having a great day.
Thank you, Brother Charles. Thank you, man. Anybody else? Real brief, real brief. And
I think it was um, interesting how he noted the difference between what he was
I think
living
that's
and what he saw on television with the Cosby Show. I think a lot of the adults on the call certainly can agree that the Cosby Show, I can speak for myself, was certainly impactful to to my childhood. And so that was a mental escape for him because his reality was drastically different. But he used that to compare, I guess, to what he thought family or marriage or relationship or love would look like, or even a father, like he mentioned, Dr. Huxtable and his son Theo, relative to what he was experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's a good observation. To piggyback on what you just said, Anitra, is that that's the type of impact the TV has on kids' lives, right? Because a lot of times we think that TV don't matter. Kids, they can watch anything they want to watch. It's not going to affect them. And now we're seeing all kind of stuff with social media that these kids have access to, not just social media, but also music and all those different type of things. And we think that it's not having an impact on these kids' lives. But Sam is telling you flat out what he saw with the Cosby Show had an impact on his life. It was a positive impact, thankfully, because he was able to see married couples how they interacted with one another. Nonetheless, it had an influence on his life.
Hey, B, I think he saw the Cosby Show, but that really truly wasn't. It was a good thing for Black people to see, but that wasn't the reality of the Black family. And I'm not excusing the father's violence by any means, but I understand that was a man in pain too, because I think the little insert was he come home and he go retreat to his room. I don't think people really understand the struggles because I deal with it myself. Like you go work all day dealing with what you got going on at work, the troubles of just an African American man on a day to day life, and then you come home and the man just didn't have. I guess he didn't have an outlet. That's why he went to his room, and that's pain. That's trauma we was talking about. He didn't have an outlet, so he just retreated to his room, and unfortunately, it turned into violence. But yeah, that's just somebody who's just struggling with everyday life. And like you say, you come home and there's 8 miles to feed, so you deal with all the stuff at work, and then you come home and you got to deal with something else. I think it was a lot for that man, and him and his wife just didn't know how to address it together. The way they addressed it was violence, which wasn't right, but I understand.
Yeah, that's good, Daniel. And I agree with you that we do need an outlet. A lot of times, especially men, that's the reason why I try to get men together a lot because men internalize. Women, man. I know right now with my wife, boy, she'll go out with her girlfriends in a minute, and you can best believe while she out with her girlfriends, they talking, and they talking about a variety of topics. Men don't do that. It's just not naturally in our nature, but we have to get better with that. That's the reason why, I offer men to, hey man, look, let's go play some golf. Let's go bowling, let's go fishing, let's go do whatever because men don't utilize outlets. They internalize everything. And we have to do better. We have to do better. Anybody else, real brief, and then I'm gonna go ahead on and get started again reading. But if anybody else want to share something real brief, I would love to hear you. If not, I'm gonna continue reading. All right, let's continue. Maybe some kids adjust easily to this kind of life where when they're not a bleep on their parents' radar, but I wasn't like that. The older I got, the more I wanted my father's guidance. I yearned for it. 2 doors away lived a friend of mine, Mike, who enjoyed what looked like a great relationship with his father. In warm winter, they would shoot hoops and horse around in the backyard. I would stare at them through the fence as if hypnotized, wanting what they had. So he's looking through the fence, seeing this other father and son engaged with one another. He wanted that. He wished he had that with his father. If only I could have interested my dad in doing the same. I would have loved to burst into their yard to toss out a challenge. Me and my dad against you guys. But I knew the thought was preposterous. My father often saw me playing basketball with friends on his way home from work and never even bothered to slow down. I can't remember a day that Pop glanced at my homework. So maybe Mom helped him with his homework every day. Pops wouldn't involve with that. I built a go-kart by myself. I built a basketball hoop in the driveway by myself. On my own, I developed a love for sports, but my father never encouraged it. It was a kind neighbor, Mr. Brown, who noticed my interest in baseball and took Nudie and me to my first major league game. The first game Sam went to was with his neighbor, Mr. Brown. Okay, it wasn't his father. Mr. Brown noticed his interest in sports and took him and Nudie to a baseball game. Okay. His church had organized a bus trip to Shea Stadium to see the Mets. Nudie and I sat next to each other on the bus ride and at the game. I'll never forget it. It was a Saturday afternoon in 1986, and the Mets were playing the Dodgers. You should have seen us. Nudie and I were 13, and we came with our mitts ready to catch a ball off the player's bat. The Mets lost the game, but they went on to win the World Series that year. I love seeing my favorite players in person. Dwight Gooden, Gary Carter, Darryl Strawberry. I remember those players. Mr. Brown made sure we were having a good time, supplying us with all the hot dogs and sodas we could consume. It's a memory I'll keep for a lifetime. Now, what I want to point out with that is that unlike George, Sam grew up with his father, but he didn't have a good relationship with his father. He didn't have a close relationship with his father because his father was distant. Okay. Mr. Brown was the one. So let's look at Mr. Brown as like a mentor. Mr. Brown was the one that took Sam under his wing, brought him to a baseball game that changed his life, where he was able to see his favorite players, Darryl Strawberry, Dwight Gooden, and Gary Carter. His father didn't do this with him. It was a neighbor. Just want to point that out. Pop rarely talked to me about drugs, sex, women, education, or anything like that.
We had it on me. You should. Oh.
Hold on, you guys. Hold on. Pop rarely talked to me about drugs, sex, women, education, or anything like that. Occasionally, he might tell me to stay in school, but he delivered this message more like an order, without much conversation or advice. This approach didn't meet my needs at all. Being a curious kid, I had a million questions. I was hungry to know how to conduct myself in social situations. Now, remember, George struggled with that as well. He struggled with dealing with social situations as well. Okay, well, Sam struggling with it also. What do I say when I meet someone? How do I act? Should I offer a handshake? How much do I reveal about the real me? How much do I keep to myself? I used to mumble and stutter when I was introduced to strangers, not knowing what to say. Nobody ever told me to stand up straight, look someone in the eyes, and give them a firm handshake. Daddy never taught him these things. I had deeper questions from my dad, but as a child, I didn't know how to voice them. How do I avoid the path that I see my friends going down? I knew I didn't want to be like them. I saw them driving off in police cars, and I knew I didn't want that life. But I couldn't see any other way. You can't aim for what you can't see. I've said that countless of times since I first wrote those words in The Pact. The Pact is a book that he wrote before this book here. I firmly believe it's a problem that has choked the hope out of many talented young boys. With Pop holed up in his room, I couldn't really pull the answers out of him that I needed. Luckily, when I was around 8 or 9, I found someone willing to give his full attention, and I latched onto him so tightly that he could barely turn around without seeing me. My friend and I would flock to Reggie Brown. Okay, remember Reggie Brown? He would flock to Reggie Brown. Okay. As soon as we saw his beat up Golden Nova pull up every afternoon and park in the cemetery across the street from my house. To spend time with him, all I had to do was climb the cemetery's black wrought iron gate and hoist myself over the top. As soon as I leaped on the other side, it was like landing on a different planet. Evergreen Cemetery was full of tall trees, peaceful hills, and singing birds. It also employed the baddest mentor anybody could have, Reggie Brown, the cemetery's night watchman, had grown up in the projects. At age 18, he somehow managed to step aside the traps of drugs and violence. He didn't drink, he didn't sling drugs. Still, he commanded respect. Reggie had studied Kung Fu for years, and nobody pushed him around. He was the role model I craved. Smart, but cool. Straight as an arrow, but not corny. He was vibrant and full of life, especially when I compared him to other guys his age who were nodding on the streets in a drugged stupor. His paying job as a security guard was sprawling Evergreen Cemetery, which reaches into 3 cities, Hillside, Elizabeth, and Newark, was to lock the gates at 43rd and stay until midnight to chase out unauthorized visitors. Bad guys often sneaked into the vast graveyard after dark to shoot drugs and rob people who often used the cemetery as a shortcut. It also fell to him to protect the mourners visiting their loved ones. Growing up inside the building 5 of the Drayton Street projects gave him a distant advantage in this aspect of his job. Give Reggie a description of the guy who robbed you, and he would immediately stride into the projects, knock on just the right door, and yank the missing pocketbook out of a drug person's hands. Muscled and brown, he was like a real life superhero. So they looked up to Reggie. I was thrilled when he took an interest in me. Reggie called me little man and eventually started to treat me like I was his deputy, letting me ride alongside him on his nightly patrols. He taught me to drive long before I was old enough, and I'd proudly circle his car around the cemetery's 1.5 mile long perimeter road while he kept eye out for the criminal activity. So who taught him how to drive? Reggie. He got a father at home. His father didn't teach him how to drive. It was Reggie. Nobody could tell me I wasn't the man when I was by Reggie's side. Why didn't his father make him feel that way? Stranger did, Reggie. Reggie made him feel like, man, he's invincible. Nobody couldn't tell me nothing when I'm with Reggie. Technically, Reggie was being paid to keep neighborhood folks out, but without any permission whatsoever from cemetery management. He secretly was ushering in local kids for what amounted to the best after school program in the neighborhood. So after school, everybody would go flock to Reggie, man. But wasn't much of a problem because Reggie was a cool dude. Reggie was promoting positivity. He wasn't promoting that foolishness. He was promoting positivity. Okay. His passion was to rescue kids from the streets by giving them something positive to focus on. So he set up a taekwondo class. He set up a taekwondo class in the cemetery's chapel. As a youth, he had studied Kung Fu under a charismatic master named Frank Melvin, also a hero in our community. And Reggie decided it was time to pass on the skill to an up and coming generation. We considered ourselves in training with Reggie, and we took it seriously. I was without a doubt the most faithful student. Usually, I was the first to arrive and the last to leave. All right, I'm gonna read this little paragraph right here, and then we're gonna open it up for a little discussion if y'all want to have a discussion. Give me a minute. Yet Reggie has strict rules for taking part in the fun. If you do any drugs, drink alcohol, cut school, or disrespect your parents, you're out. You can't come over here to learn Taekwondo. I know y'all like being around me, but guess what? Y'all can't be around me if you're doing drugs, being disobedient to your parents, not listening. You can't come. You're out. Reggie said. Once after a memorial service, he took us inside the chapel where the body was waiting to be cremated. Come here. I want to show you guys something, he said, motioning us to him. See this? He opened the casket, exposing the face of a lifeless young man in his 20s. If you go out there and start doing those drugs and hanging out with those knuckleheads, this was going to happen to you. I was hungry for fatherly advice, and I certainly got it from Reggie, who delivered it with a dramatic flair that still lingers in my memory. Okay. Pause right there. Anybody want to comment? Anybody want to share their thoughts about what I've read so far? We've introduced another character, Reggie. They're highly influenced by Reggie.
I have to say something.
Go ahead, baby.
I think Reggie is very right, and I think he did a good job teaching him about taking drugs and not doing drugs and doing the right thing. And I think the dad should have been a part of it, but Reggie stepped up and did what his dad was supposed to do, taught him what to not do and what to do. So I think Reggie played a big part in this.
Yeah, good perspective, Avery. I'm paying attention. Anyone else? Anyone else? I'm aware that right now it's 11 o'clock. We are after the hour. What we can do, it's totally up to you guys, is we can pick up with the rest of this story on Friday, or we can continue. Okay. You guys let me know what you want to do. If you guys want me to continue, I have no problem continuing. But I just want to acknowledge where we are. Right now it's 11 o'clock. This was supposed to be an hour meeting. I didn't think we was going to get it done in an hour, though, to be honest with you, because it's a lot of material. We actually have more material to cover with Reggie. I'm sorry, with Sam than we did with George. So are you guys still, y'all doing good? Still interested in the conversation? Nitra, how you feel?
I I would like to have more discussion. Perhaps someone can share if they identify with any of the characters in the story so far, whether that's from the father's perspective or Reggie, who's playing more like a mentor to him, or even, his childhood.
Mm.
I think Reggie's making a good organization with the kung fu because he's also helping people get their anger out, and he's helping people get off the streets and not become the person that Reggie has seen, the people that Reggie has met.
Yeah. Yeah, Reggie was a positive influence in the community. And that's something that we don't see too often nowadays. And we need more of that. We need more positive influences in our communities and in our neighborhoods. And that's what Reggie represented. He represented that positivity in the neighborhood, in the community. Daniel, how you feel, man? You feel good? You good with continuing the conversation?
Yeah, I think it's good that he was able to find a mentor. That seems to be what's going on that path because he wasn't getting that at home. And the good thing about it was it's a mentor that's looking out for his well being and wants his well being, not teaching him something else. So that's what I like to hear.
Right.
Yeah, we certainly need more of that. Seem like, where we are now in society, people are teaching kids the wrong thing, but back then, Reggie was a positive influence in their life. So it seems like everybody is open to continuing the conversation, continuing me reading. So I'm gonna go ahead on and continue, and maybe I'll find another breaking point, and we can maybe have another brief discussion. But I still have quite a few pages to read, to be honest. But I'm gonna do my best to cover as much as I can, and we'll go from there. So let me continue reading the story. Okay,
Well,
here we
PJ,
go.
just to be mindful of everybody's time, what is your estimated time of finding a good
Maybe
pause?
11:30. Maybe 11:30. We'll try to shut things down, close it out. Maybe around 11:30.
Okay.
I know last time when we started off with George, we did 2 hours. We'll try to see if I can wrap it up at 11:30. Everybody good?
Yeah, 11:30 is good.
All right, Coach Josh said he good, so that's what's up. All right. So let's go. Let's go. Reggie always preached that using violence to solve a beef is ignorant. He urged us to respect our bodies and to use our brains. Reggie was a sharp dude because he was only 18, and that's the type of stuff he's telling these kids. He's a sharp dude. Class, our focus is not on fighting, he would tell us. I want to build you up mentally, physically, and spiritually. Although he taught us the kicks and punches of Kung Fu, he made it clear that he didn't want us to use the techniques for street brawling. Why would you want to hurt your fellow man because you have a disagreement? You're smarter than that. Talk it out, learn when to walk away. You should only fight to protect your life, he would often instruct us. But it rubbed some guys in our neighborhood the wrong way to see Reggie developing such a following. Guys were always jumping in our faces to challenge us. And there did come a day when Reggie let one trash talking guy grown him into a fight, and Reggie beat him up fair and square. When it was over, Reggie surprised us by apologizing and saying he should have never lost his composure like that. The funny thing is, his challenger was so impressed by Reggie's skills and philosophy that he eventually joined us in our training session. So Reggie impressed him so much with them combinations, he said, man, I got to come join y'all. Reggie, now a lieutenant in the Pennsylvania correction system, as well as a husband and father of 3 daughters, remains one of the biggest influences and the closest I've ever came to the wise, attentive father figure. I reported faithfully to his after-school training sessions until the age of 13 and 14 when I started to lose interest. Okay, now here's a turning point in the story. So I want to point it out to y'all, and I also want to point out to you the ages. So he said at 13 and 14 is when he started to lose interest. Okay, so before he was listening to Reggie was a positive influence, and man, he was listening to him. Things are starting to fall off the rails now. Okay, now listen at what I'm getting ready to share with you guys. Okay, it was a pattern that Reggie knew too well. It was like our bar mitzvah, a rite of passage in the most negative sense. He has been known to say, shaking his head, about neighborhood kids when they hit their teen years. Around here, on their 13th birthday, that's when kids get pulled in by the luster of the streets and start breaking the laws at age 13. Okay, it's very important because why? My kid is 12, he'll be 13 in December. Okay. Avery's right behind him. She's 10, but not long after, she's going to be coming up on 13. So it seems like the teen years when kids start falling apart, which is why it's so important that these kids get educated on the calls and be a part of the conversation that we're having, like we're having today. Okay. Look at what he says. I was no different. I was starting to feel the heat of peer pressure. I was entering high school and moving into a new phase. I was now officially into girls and sports, plus dabbling in some other stuff that I knew Reggie would never approve of. So guess what? I stopped going. So guess what? He stopped going to see Reggie, right? Why he stopped going to see Reggie? You know Reggie gonna hold him accountable. That's why you gonna stop. He stopped going by Reggie because now your focus has changed. Now you're into some other stuff. So now you don't want to see Reggie. Reggie represented accountability for him. In high school, I played basketball, football, and baseball during lunch hour. And after school, I played baseball for University High. I was a pitcher and shortstop. I even had a few write-ups in the local paper, which added to my confidence and convinced me I was a sure shot for the pros. I was always a smart kid, and good grades came pretty easily to me. My sports ability and demeanor placed me in the cool crowd. I was far from a nerd, but I wasn't a dumb jock either. Through sports and mischief, I earned my popularity. Although I wasn't into the drug scene, I started hanging around the older teenagers, staying out late on school nights. Mom warned me to stop hanging out on street corners, but her words didn't penetrate. He didn't listen to his mom. I avoided Reggie. I knew he could see into my soul and would know just how much I was compromising myself. Without a doubt, my teen hormones were starting to burrow. I was starting to look at girls, although I had no clue how to approach them. Okay. We would often gather, listen to this, we would often gather in a circle and tell one another stories about the girls we had crushes on. I listened carefully because these sessions served as my main source of information on the opposite sex. So if you guys remember, it was, I forgot who it was that taught George about sex, but it was a coworker of his. They worked together. He the one taught George about sex. It wasn't his father. It was a friend who 3 years older than him. The guy was 18, as a matter of fact, and taught George about sex. George was 13. Well, look at how Sam is learning about sex. He's learning about sex through a group of kids at school. Right. So it says that we would often gather in circles and tell one another stories about the girls we had crushes on. He said, I listened carefully because these sessions served as my main source of information about sex. Okay. This is what happened at the school. Okay. I said on yesterday, a lot of times these kids at school, man, they're not around anything positive. They're around all kind of negative influences. Well, that's the experience that I'm sorry, that's the experience that Sam has. He learned about sex from these guys at school. They're talking about it. He said, I wasn't in a hurry, but I was curious. So he was curious about sex. Okay. I would have loved to have shared my secret with Pop since I had no idea what I ought to do next. If I ever needed him to teach me a class in Girls 101, it was at this moment. But we didn't have that kind of relationship. That's what he says. Right. So this is what I'm going to do because apparently we had some people that dropped off because they probably weren't able to stay for the rest of the conversation. And I totally understand that it's Saturday. Sometimes people, man, they got things to do. So I get it. So what we're going to do, we're going to wrap up there. And I think what I may do is pick up with some more of the story on Friday. That's probably how we're going to handle it. Okay. But anybody want to share briefly what I read so far?
I think it's obvious that the role of a parent, specifically in this discussion of father, has on the impact that that role has on any child. Um, you know, like Samson, right? Is his name?
Yeah,
Samson
yeah,
is one who his father was present in the home, physically was present, but not emotionally available and not intellectually available. He was just there. Um, but um, I think it's a big circle because you everybody have they everybody have their own issues, even as adults and as parents, we're dealing with our own emotional healing and finding space to um, escape sometimes from reality, whether that's in a positive manner or in a negative manner, but it certainly has an impact on your children, whom God has given you responsibility over. So I think it's important that we all find ways to positively escape, whether that's through journaling, whether that's through prayer, whether that's through, having a positive um, relationship with other people where you can talk. But like Daniel mentioned earlier, the dad, he clearly was going through things that he was trying to deal with himself as a grown man. And because that wasn't dealt with, it impacted his relationship with his children and with his spouse, which obviously had a impact on Samson.
yeah. That's good. Anybody else? Anybody else? So let me just be totally transparent with you guys on the call. and I'm sure my wife is going to agree with what I'm getting ready to say. There was one time in my marriage where I was emotionally checked out. You know, I would come home and resort to my room. You know, I wasn't as bad as Sam's father, but I was distant. I was distant because I had a job that I hated and wanted to punch somebody in the mouth, to be honest. So I had to find myself, man. I had to realize that me being so distant that I wasn't being a good father to my children. I wasn't being a good father to, being a good husband to my wife. So obviously I had to do better. I had to pull myself together. It wasn't easy, but I realized that if I wanted to have a relationship with my children, and if I wanted to be a good father, a good husband to my wife, I had to get it together. So I'm a different man now. You know, I'm not the man I used to be. I've grown. And that came with a lot of work, you know, a lot of prayer, a lot of everything. It wasn't easy. Anybody else want to share? Like Ms. Gannell, getting ready to prepare some lunch for everybody.
I'm sorry, Mr. Byron. I'm all over the place. We cleaning up and we pack and we got a flight in the morning. We
Oh,
got a business.
fun.
We got business trip. So
Well, that's good now. That's good.
yeah,
Yeah,
we're doing a lot of stuff right now.
that's good. Well, I appreciate y'all being on the call. Yeah, like I said, I'm gonna go ahead on and end the call today because I know a lot of people have a lot to do, and I don't want to waste you guys' time. I don't want to take you guys' time anymore. So let's say a quick prayer and let everybody go ahead and enjoy this Saturday. Lord, I thank you, God, for what was shared on this morning. I thank you, God, for everyone that attended the call. God, I pray, God, that the word that was shared today, Lord, would have an impact on these kids' lives. It would have an impact on the adults' lives. And God, that you would continue, God, to be a part of our lives and use us, God, in a great way, Lord. God, give us direction. God, give us wisdom. God, we need it. God, we are nothing without you, Lord. But we believe by faith that with you all things are possible. So, God, I pray your protection over our lives, oh Lord, as Miss Gannell and Josh and their children, oh God, get ready to go on a trip, Lord. I pray that you'll watch over them, Lord, protect them and keep them, Lord. God, for we know we have an enemy, an adversary. He tries to kill us and destroy our lives, try to destroy our reputation. But God, we thank you that the power of God is more powerful than the power of the enemy, Lord. I thank you, God, for covering them and keeping them. And Lord, cover us and keep us today, Lord, on our weekend, Lord. Help us, God, to be united as a family, Lord, not divided, but on one accord. God, we just thank you and we honor you and we praise your name in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
All right. All right. That's a wrap. Wrap.
Great.
Love y'all.
Y'all have a good weekend. Safe travels.
All right. Thank you. Y'all too.
Thank y'all. Y'all too.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.